Dean Obadallah. He wants to be your Muslim friend.
Most Muslims, I know many, are great people.
Watch this.
People.
You're listening to the Dean Obadallah Show, where comedy meets politics and all things in between.
And welcome back to Dean Obadallah Show. We're live Wednesday, May 29th. And I promise we're going to get back to the whole discussion about impeachment now, impeachment later, no impeachment, just hang out, whatever we should do in the next hour. But right now, very happy to have in studio, for the first time I'm getting to meet her. I've had her on this show, on my old show many times before anyone knew her. I knew her. I discovered Shannon Watts. Now she's a mother of five, founder of Moms Demand Action, an organization that demands changes to gun laws to save lives in our nation. And she is self-professed NRA's worst nightmare, which I think you are. And she got a great new book out that I have right in front of me, Fight Like a Mother. Shannon, it's great to meet you in person, my friend.
It's so nice to be sitting with you finally, as opposed to just being like these strangers on the phone.
We've talked. You reminded me, you were once in Paris on vacation. This is before Shannon was famous, of course. She was like,
Infamous.
Sure, I'll do a phone call on my old show on the Insight Channel, which I was just in the middle of the day. It wasn't political at all. And I was political, but I was not allowed to be as progressive as I really am there. In a way, they wanted some balance. So here I don't have to be balanced. So you've done a remarkable job building an organization, as you document in your book. It all began from a horrific event, December 14, 2012, 20 children and 6 educators killed at Sandy Hook. And tell us a little bit about what that was like. You see the news, and what made you spring into action?
You know, I was a stay-at-home mom of 5. I had been a corporate communications executive for a decade or more before that. And throughout my life, like all Americans, I had seen these horrific shooting tragedies. I lived in Texas when the Luby's massacre happened. If you remember that, there was this place in Waco, a restaurant where all of these people were shot and killed. And it was just sort of at the dawn of 24-hour-a-day television. And that had such a huge impact on me. I was a college student at the time. I was a young mom when Columbine happened. I was a working mom when Virginia Tech happened. And time after time, I thought, someone's going to do something. And then the Gabby Giffords shooting happened in Tucson. And I thought, well, this is one of their own. This is their colleague. They will do something. And they didn't. And I can remember folding laundry that day in December, watching the news come in. And it was almost instantaneous that pundits came on, saying that the solution to this crisis in our country was more guns. And I went from being sad and devastated to being angry and agitated. And I thought, okay, I have 2 choices. I can move my family of 7 to another country, which is pretty tough to do.
Sure.
Or I can stay and fight. And I had absolutely no idea what that meant. I'd never been politically active. I knew nothing about gun laws. I only knew that our nation was broken. And that's...
Did you know the NRA? Did you know much about the NRA?
Nothing. I knew nothing about the NRA. In fact, I naively thought, oh, the NRA will come out and say, like, we should pass background checks or, you know.
How unintentionally funny is that to hear now? I mean, it's funny. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
So,
and then they doubled down.
So you went from not being active at all, just following it like a typical American, watching these stories, and you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Someone should do something about it. And then it got to the point where you're like, well, I might have to be that person to do something. So what did you do?
Well, and to be clear, I had 75 Facebook friends. I did not think that I was a superhero who was going to solve this issue. I went online and I thought, I'm going to join something like Mothers Against Drunk Driving for gun safety. And I searched for at least an hour or 2. And what I found were mostly male-run think tanks, some one-off state organizations, also mostly run by men. And I knew that I wanted to be part of a badass army of women because, you know, you want something done, give it to a busy woman. And I thought, I'll start this Facebook page and have a conversation. And I actually called it 1 Million Moms for Gun Control. I didn't have a focus group. Very soon after, my daughter, who's gay, informed me that 1 Million Moms was an anti-gay group trying to get Ellen DeGeneres not to be the spokeswoman of JCPenney, and that gun control was a very polarizing term. So we changed our name pretty quickly. That's the downfall of not having a focus group when you name an organization.
But your earnestness and sincereness, I think, still made the difference because little by little, you found other mothers finding your website, however they found your Facebook page, just through feeling this sense of something has to be done. What am I going to do about it? So how quickly did you get to the point where you're like, I can do more than just have a Facebook page with a long, cumbersome name and actually do something more.
We still have a long, cumbersome name, but
Well, I call it Moms Demand Action, but it really is a longer
Yeah.
name, so I just keep it Moms Demand Action.
but it wasn't really little by little. It was instantaneous. It was like lightning in a bottle. And if you know anything about type A women, you won't be surprised to know they started Googling me and calling me and emailing me and saying, I want to do this where I live, not understanding really what this was. And that is how we moved almost immediately from being an online conversation to being an offline movement where we were actually organizing.
When was the first milestone in development where you're like, this actually could be something more than just a few people on Facebook who are like-minded and actually taking shape in ways that you're like, wow, this could potentially be a very effective national organization?
Within a week, I was on the cover of USA Today. And I think in part because America started to think, oh, could we finally have a Mothers Against Drunk Driving for gun safety? And then I can remember a few weeks in, we got a call from the White House saying, in the aftermath of this horrific shooting at Sandy Hook, we are going to try to pass what became the Manchin-Toomey bill.
Right.
So in honor of this tragedy, we will do something that will save lives. We will require a background check on every gun sale. And we want women and moms to stand with us. And we want you to organize around this. And that's when it started to feel real.
And you document in the book the idea of certain times you have defeats. Manchin-Toomey bill, which everyone's going to remember, if you don't remember the term, was universal background checks after Sandy Hook. You're like, well, that's be a no-brainer. 90% of Americans support it. Yet, we couldn't get the votes in the Senate to actually stop debate to have a vote on it. What was it like for you to be emotionally invested, time invested in that, and seeing a failure of something that should have passed like 100-0, frankly?
We spent so much time getting ready for that vote, in district meetings, going to we had something called Moms Take the Hill Day at the Capitol. We invested so much time and energy into trying to get the Senate to pass this bill. It failed by just a handful of votes. What was really disappointing was that several of those votes were Democrats.
Yep.
None of them are still in office, by the way. The last one of them to lose their job was Heidi Heitkamp. And I can remember after the vote, she said the reason, as a mom and a woman and a Democrat, that she voted against it was because she heard more from the other side. And it was then that I and the rest of our volunteers vowed that that would never happen again, that lawmakers could make a cowardly vote because they chose to, but it couldn't be because they said they hadn't heard enough from the vocal majority, right? They were hearing from a vocal minority. We were a silent majority, and we wanted to change that.
It's during the ACA debate, I had many people on from Indivisible who were former staffers who would share how the elected official they worked for actually did look at the tally of how many calls each week and the numbers they were going. And it made a slight difference in the ACA. Perhaps the couple of senators we needed on the right to come over, John McCain famously, saying no, perhaps, because they knew they were taking a vote that was not popular at all among Americans. Maybe it was popular I don't even think it was popular among Republicans, frankly, but it wasn't in their own caucus. So what was the lesson you took from this? You had this big fight, and what can you, because a lot of times in your book, it's not just about your work. It's not just a memoir. It's part memoir, but it's part pep talk and roadmap for other progressives and other activists to get involved. So what could be the lesson beyond just this piece of legislation, but for anyone else who's starting a group or involved in an organization?
I think one of the most important early lessons we learned is that Congress is not where this work begins, it's where it ends. And if you remember marriage equality,
Sure.
Activists went directly to Congress, asked for marriage equality. The gift they got in return was the Defense of Marriage Act, which they did not want. So they pivoted and started working on the ground in state houses and changing the culture to eventually point the president, the Congress, the Supreme Court in the right direction.
Right.
And we really took a page out of that playbook. I'll be honest, I thought after we failed on Manchin-Toomey that maybe we would disband. Maybe the country wasn't ready for this. Our volunteers would feel defeated. And what was so striking to me was that intuitively our volunteers pivoted and started doing this work where they lived. And there were governors who were willing to act in the wake of Sandy Hook in Delaware and Maryland and Colorado and Connecticut and elsewhere. The other piece that we really weren't thinking about was that we would also have to play defense and how much time it takes to beat back the bad bills that the gun lobby puts forward.
I recall having a conversation with you a few years ago about your pressure points weren't just elected officials, but corporations. Because they're having open carry going into maybe Chipotle or something like that. Where you're ordering a taco and a guy has an AR-15 next to you. Do you really need that? How scary could it get in here? How much picante could you eat? So you were successful. What were your lessons and what can you share from that? Because I think that's so instructive because sometimes you have to think outside of what would be the normal traditional box of we can't get elected officials.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Sometimes corporations are more responsive because they understand exactly what it means to their bottom line to put off some. So what were some of those lessons involved with corporations?
The women only have certain levers of power that we can pull right now. That'll change, but right now we only make up about 20% of state legislatures, about 25% of Congress. We're less than 5% of Fortune 1000 CEOs. So we aren't making the laws or the policies that protect our families and communities, but we are more than half of the population, so we can use our voices. We are the majority of the voting electorate. We can use our voices or our votes. And we also make about 80% of the spending decisions for our families. So spending power is incredibly important. And I can remember in June of 2013, we were only 6 months old, that I saw on the news that Starbucks was no longer going to allow cigarettes or even electronic cigarettes 20 feet outside their stores, regardless of state law. And so I called them and I said, well, will you still allow open carry? Because you could see online that people were taking AR-15s and handguns in their pocket in to get lattes. And open carry is legal in 45 states. So they said, no, we were still going to follow state laws when it came to open carry. And we decided we were more afraid of secondhand bullets than secondhand smoke. So we embarked on a campaign and we were so small, we couldn't even engage in a boycott. We had to do skip Starbucks Saturdays.
And you talk about that in the book. So what was that? How that worked?
It was just every Saturday we would share images of how we were not going to Starbucks. Soccer moms spend a lot of time at Starbucks.
Sure.
And how we were having coffee at their competitors or at home. But we also were able to make images of people open carrying inside Starbucks go viral, because what happened was the gun extremists were so mad about our campaign that they started showing up in mass everywhere. And those pictures don't look great for Starbucks.
It's remarkable that corporations, you actually can have more of an impact, and sometimes for the other side, because they'll over respond to people on the right who have a far right agenda on something, and I've seen that happen. So let's take a break and come back. I want to talk about the NRA and what you had to go through. We've talked about this in the past. You talk about it in the book. The bizarre campaigns they had, painting you as a 50s style housewife. I'm like,
if only they knew I don't cook or use an iron.
But what's bizarre to me is that it seemed like that's the kind of woman they would like in a way for some of those guys.
I think so.
They're so instead of they're mocking you, but on some level, others must be like, she's perfect. Why are you making fun of her? That kind of stuff. I'm sorry to do the Southern accent. It could be anywhere. So let's take a break.
I didn't realize that was a Southern accent.
That was just you're right. That was that was sort of like the ambiguous villain in the Bond movies now, because we can't make fun of any group. So let's come right back with our friend Shannon Watts, from the founder of Moms Demand Action, talk about her new book, Fight Like a Mother, right after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
My slogan for Trump in 2020, Trump for prison 2020.
SiriusXM Progress. And now, more of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live Wednesday, May 29th. And we're here with Shannon Watts. You see her all the time on cable news, doing a great job. Founder of Moms Demand Action. And her new book, Fight Like a Mother, is out. Great book about her organization, but also helpful tools for any organization, for any activist, how to be effective. And that's very, very important for all of us. So let's talk about, you talked about in your book, the NRA and dealing with the NRA. And we've actually spoken about it. Can you share a little what the NRA did in targeting you?
So within hours after starting my Facebook page, I was targeted by not necessarily NRA members specifically, but just gun extremists who were calling me and texting me, driving by my house. Eventually, I started getting letters with sort of the Son of Sam cutouts in them.
Wow.
Threats of death, sexual violence to me and to my daughters. And it was an underbelly of America I honestly did not know existed.
Right.
But what was interesting was that the more successful we got, the more powerful we got, that then the NRA's spokespeople began going after me. They would write about me in their magazine. You were talking about before the break, they had a picture of me that the title was Not Watts, She Seems. In other words, I wasn't really a stay-at-home mom because
Right.
I didn't iron and, use a duster and all of these anachronistic things they think of a stay-at-home mom. And it kind of just went from there. And what's
How
been...
concerning was it? Let me ask you, because you have children, and we were talking in the break that I've had death threats from the neo-Nazis, so I'm suing, but I don't have children. So my level of concern is for me, and I really am not that concerned about me. It's more for people I work with. Like if someone came here to try to get me, they might hurt innocent people who work here and stuff. Not that I'm not innocent. I think I'm innocent, but still. But you have children. What is it like? What are your concerns when you hear these death threats, knowing they're saying things to you, but also about your family?
Some of it has become, I'll be honest, like white noise. I have the personality that if you come at me, I just refuse to be intimidated or silenced. My kids are kind of like that too.
Oh, that's good. That's very good.
They have never been afraid for me or for themselves. If they were, I'm not sure I could have done this work. So we just ignore it for the most part. I mean, I do travel using an alias. I have to take certain safety precautions. But within, I don't know if you've seen this, but within the last couple of weeks, the NRA themselves have gone after me. They started tagging me on Instagram and on Twitter and sending horrific death threats my way, even on Mother's Day.
Wow.
Which was really a wonderful boon for my book, Fight Like a Mother. I sold about 500 copies within 24 hours because people couldn't believe that they were so brazen. But I also think they're trying to distract from their own crises.
They're imploding. I recall Dana Loesch I would tweet that you were coming on my old show, and Dana Loesch, who I didn't like at all. I don't know why. And she would find the tweets because she was not a follower and then say something. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, what happened in your life, Dana, that you have to do this? And then her husband got involved and I was fighting with her husband. And at some point, I'm like, why am I fighting the Loesch's? I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I said, Dana, you're getting paid by the NRA to do this. We all know that. So you're not convincing anyone but your base. So it means nothing. And she would get all upset and her husband would be like, stop bullying my wife. I'm like, I don't even, she came after me. She's tagging my tweets. I had nothing to do with it. So I don't even know what you went through. I'm just dealing with the Loesch's.
I mean, I've dealt with them online, but also I was at an event in 2014 at a park with my kids. It was a Moms Demand Action event during the NRA annual meeting. We weren't on their premises. We were just sharing an opposing point of view far away. And she showed up in full makeup with a camera crew and started sort of bullying me in front of my kids. So it's been a long and sordid history with Dana, but the karma that came due today was that it sounds like she may be losing her job at NRA TV.
Oh, poor Dana Loesch. Well, she'll find something somewhere. There's maybe
beets. She sells beets.
She sells beet
super
juice.
beets.
That's
super
right.
beets, yeah.
So how do you deal with, in the book you talked about not backing down to bullies, which is important, but how do you deal with the anger without succumbing to anger yourself and meeting anger with anger? Because I can't believe that's effective, and I always try to avoid that because it's very easy. It's base. I can instantly go and scream at a Trump supporter, and I really try not to do that. Sometimes I can't help it, but 95% of the time, don't do it.
No, you'll never see me engage in ad hominem attacks. If you can't fight with facts and stay above board, then there's no use in having an argument. And really that's sinking to Dana's level or to the NRA's level.
I agree. That's the hard. It's
hard. It takes
hard
discipline.
because you have a conversation about an issue you're passionate about. In this case, there are many issues, but you're an advocate on this very issue. So you're very passionate. And someone says ridiculous things that you know are not true.
Like I drink boxed wine in my driveway and take Xanax. Usually that's what the gun extremists tell me.
That's what they say to you?
Yes.
That you drink boxed wine?
But why in my driveway?
It's very specific.
It's so specific.
They're like, you drink wine in your driveway when
boxed
you're on Xanax.
Wine.
Like, it's so specific. And like, why are you saying that? Because that's what I do. So I'm just projecting. It's like everything with Trump's like he's projecting everything. Now, in your book, you make an interesting point that sometimes you have to take on a fight even though you know you're going to lose that fight because there are principles involved. Hence, like impeachment. But
I digress.
But why is it important? I agree 100%. That sometimes even, and I've taken on many fights on various issues or causes that I said we might not win this one, but in the big picture we might lose this battle, but we might win in the big picture. Why is it important to you? Why did you make that point in your book?
Because when you get involved in gun violence prevention, I mean, this is an issue where the NRA has a 30-year head start. In certain states, it's incredibly intractable, and there's a lot of gains that need to be made to get to a place where you have some skin in the game. And so we always tell our volunteers, you're going to lose. Right. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to lose battles, but keep your eyes on winning the war, ultimately. My favorite example of this is Arkansas. I had traveled to Little Rock several times to try to rally the troops there, as they were only like a handful of them. And we would meet in Little Rock, and they would just explain to me, look, this is a tough issue in this state. And then what happened was that the legislature passed a guns on campus bill. And the governor stood with the chief NRA lobbyist when he signed it. And it even allowed guns in Razorback Stadium where they serve alcohol. And women and moms were so angry in Arkansas that we grew from just about 2 local groups in the state to over a dozen. And we were able to carve out an exemption so that Razorback Stadium could not have guns in it. And then 2 of our volunteers ran for office. One was a professor in Fayetteville. She's now in the State House. And the other woman, a retired nurse and Moms Demand Action volunteer, ran against the man who put the guns on campus bill forward, beat him by 12 points. She's now in the State House.
This is great
and
story.
Then they parlayed that political power into a clean sweep this year. They beat the NRA's agenda in Arkansas, including defeating Stand Your Ground. So they did lose that initial guns on campus legislation, but ultimately, look how far they've come.
It's remarkable. And you have a whole chapter on women running. Lucy McBath was a spokesperson or one of the people you sent out because one time you're very busy now. It used to be I would DM Shannon. She's like, sure, come on. And now it's like go through like 12 layers of people, the assistant. But no, one of the times you said, let's have Lucy McBath on. And I didn't know she was going to run for Congress afterwards. And she was great. She had a compelling, heartbreaking personal story, of course. Yeah. So it was remarkable. What have you learned from the mothers? Like you've met so many now, and I'm sure you've talked to others like Lucy who've lost a loved one to gun violence. What have you learned from this experience?
Oh, I have learned so much. First of all, managing volunteers is a completely different ballgame than being, a paid manager at a corporate 100 company. That you learn to show gratitude and to be thankful for people who are willing to help you out of the goodness of their heart. I've learned that people who turn their pain into action to help other people not experience that same pain, that is the most heroic thing I can imagine. Mm-hmm. But also volunteers who spend every day carving an extra work week out of a busy week already, whether they're raising children or working or both. That is also heroic. And I've just grown to really see the goodness of humanity.
That is great. And by the way, what were a few, before I want to get into branding and some other stuff, let's talk about branding. Now, near the end, we'll get to some of the success stories from the state level. You already shared some of them. And near the end, she's got a great chapter just destroying one NRA talking point after the other. So near the end, we're going to go through a bunch of them. So everyone's going to know the answers to this if you don't know them already.
That's right.
And then
Thanksgiving table.
Right, exactly. Or whatever. Well, that's a long way away. But still, whatever. The summer, barbecue, 4th of July. 4th of July. So you have advice on branding. And what would you say? Like, I have a radio show, Progressives. I'm trying to... I don't give much thought to branding. I just do my thing, and my brand is sort of what I am. I should give more thought to it. What is the benefit of giving thought to branding? Like when you were a new organization?
You should just go by Dean.
Just Dean?
Just Dean.
No more Obidala?
Or maybe just D.
D?
What do you think? This
That's a little.
This is some free branding advice.
What Dean? How about Dean with an exclamation point or something?
Oh my God, I love it.
Because D is
Hashtag Dean. That'll make you
Hashtag
more.
Dean?
You'll trend.
I'm gonna see if I can do that. Hashtag Dean. So what is there any? Because you talk about in your book like changing the title of the thing and looking at your colors of your organization. A lot of stuff going on. So
by the way, we were red before Donald Trump
you
had
were.
his red hats. We were red back in 2012. I just want to make that clear.
Right now, if I see a red hat anywhere, it doesn't
I know.
doesn't matter
My
what's on the front
husband
of it.
wears his red Moms Demand Action hat, and everyone gives him sort of a double take.
And you're right. Before we went on air, we talked about Trump, and you mentioned that if he's a master of anything, it has to do with branding. He really is because.
Yes.
And he stays on message.
Yes.
He's like a dream of a speechwriter or like a Frank Luntz in a way. Although he does deviate, but from that brand specific thing, MAGA and that swamp garbage, he stays on that. Is that part of branding? Like if I got to stay on a message of some sort?
I do. I mean, I think messaging is certainly part of it. Hopefully the messaging is factual. And everything that we do as an organization is data-based. It's research tested. It is all about how can we save lives and keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. But when I started Moms Demand Action, I needed the skill sets of a whole lot of people. But the skill set I did bring to the table was that I had been in corporate communications for a long time, and I knew how to create a brand. And that we are so recognizable now. Lawmakers, politicians, candidates, everyone wants dozens or hundreds of Moms Demand Action volunteers standing with them in their red shirts because we're so visible. Our brand makes women feel empowered. A lot of them have said their shirts feel like superhero capes.
Oh, that's great.
And they get tattoos of our organization on,
wow.
Yes, all the time. So that's another thought is you may want to cover yourself in tattoos.
I might get at least one Sirius XM.
Yes.
But then again,
on your face.
What if I on my face and I lose my gig? Then I got to fix it into something else. I don't know what I would make it into. Like tattooing has gone too far. So branding, but Brian, this is important for. I mean, it's important for marketing purposes. There's no doubt about it. From a not-for-profit grassroots organization to those for profit, we all know that. So let's talk about some of the successes you've had. The federal level. What would be your under Trump? Do you even try to advocate on the federal level, knowing?
Yes.
So what do you do now?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, it's important to remember that the NRA invested $30 million in Donald Trump's campaign, expecting an immediate return on investment that they had waited for a very long time, and that was to pass something called concealed carry reciprocity, which basically makes the lowest common denominator law to get a permit the law of the land. So suddenly Alabama or Arkansas or whatever the lowest possible entryway to get a permit would then apply to cities like New York and Boston and San Francisco. And so it would upend state gun laws. That did not pass. They wanted to deregulate silencers, which would be a cash cow for gun manufacturers. That did not pass. They had a Republican president and a Republican Congress, and they could not, after giving Donald Trump $30 million, pass their priority legislation. So defense is a big part of what we do. But the good news is after we were able to elect a gun sense majority in the House, within 5 days of the new term, thanks in part to Lucy McBath, my former colleague, they passed H.R. 8, which was the first piece of sweeping gun reform legislation to pass either chamber of Congress in decades.
Right.
The question is, will it get voted on in the Senate? Pat Toomey, who is a Republican, has said that if it were allowed to go up for a vote, it would get 60 votes. Lindsey Graham recently said the Second Amendment is not a suicide pact. So we're seeing some move toward change, but who knows what will happen.
What would you like to see if a Democratic president gets elected in 2020 and 2021 they get in, say we get the Senate, just what would be a top 1 or 2 priorities on the federal level that you would like to see?
Closing the background check loophole is the foundation of all gun reform legislation. If we're not giving a background check to every single gun buyer, then there are too many loopholes to close in other ways. But once that happened, we would also like to see closing something called the boyfriend loophole, which we've gone into 28 states and helped disarm domestic abusers. At the federal level, we could broaden the definition of a domestic abuser to include dating partners and stalkers. We could put teeth in the law that allows law enforcement to remove the guns a domestic abuser already has.
Right.
There's also something called the Charleston loophole, which is how the shooter in Charleston was able to get his guns. So there's all different kinds of loopholes that we can close and obviously fund research on gun violence. That's something that is so incredibly important to do.
What about federal gun trafficking laws?
Yeah.
Are we still missing that after all this time?
We have laws, but the penalties are very slim. So
that's what you need more.
Yes.
And I think we may have talked in the past. I'm not sure about the bad apple gun dealers. I don't know if that's still an issue or not.
It is.
If there's still some bad, but we can't even find out who are the bad apple gun dealers, the ones selling a disproportionate amount of guns used in crimes, because the NRA and their allies were effective at essentially preventing us from knowing facts about how people are getting guns.
Right.
And then saying, well, gun laws don't save lives. Well, you won't even let us get the data to affect and craft laws that can save lives.
That's right. It's all part of a very large agenda to put guns anywhere, anytime, for anyone, no questions asked. That is their agenda.
So at what point do we actually take everyone's guns away?
Because we're not doing that.
There are conservative, the guy Kendall all the time who calls
Many
in.
of our volunteers are gun owners.
On the right who call in, they're like, you want to take everyone's guns. I'm like, it's always the most extreme because I don't know why they bring up the most extreme. I guess it makes
it's a
them feel
slippery
better.
slope, right? That's what the NRA tells them.
Right. So there's no goal, and you have gun owners who are in mom's the man action.
Yes.
And the idea is just reducing what we view as unacceptable. Like, how many deaths do we still have today and every day on average in America from gun violence?
Well, the idea is to restore the responsibilities that go along with gun rights. We have about 100 Americans who are shot and killed every single day by gun homicide, by gun suicide, by unintentional shootings, which is a very uniquely American phenomenon, that children would get a hold of guns and hurt themselves or other people. All of it speaks to our culture of gun violence. You know, I came to this issue because I was a mom scared my kids weren't safe in their schools. I was a white suburban mom essentially living in a bubble because there's so much gun violence that impacts city centers and rural communities, and all of it matters, and we have to figure it all out.
When we hear people on the right who are very active on issues of pro-life, but then some of the same ones, not all of them, are ones against enacting laws that can save children's lives. They talk a lot about children, and I respect I might disagree on pro-choice, but I might respect their views on that, and I would respect them even more if they would say, well, and I've read statistics, 5 to 8 children will die by guns every day, and it might even be a higher number. You refuse to engage on those issues, it destroys your credibility that you actually care about life as much, or children's lives. And shouldn't we be doing more to save the lives of the children in this country from gun violence?
Well, I mean, the lawmakers who say that gun laws won't stop gun violence believe that banning abortion will stop abortion. So there is a strange juxtaposition there. If anything else was killing about 7 children every single day in this country, you can be sure that lawmakers would act. But because too many of them are beholden to the gun lobby, they haven't yet.
So, by the way, do you have insight to what's going on in the NRA? I'll read some articles here and there, but it seems like they're imploding. It seems like they're financially strapped. I'm not sure is Russia not funding them anymore? Whatever was going on there. Can you share a little what is going on with the NRA?
Yeah, so this has, we've always said since we started that our job as volunteers was to shine a flashlight under the refrigerator and force the cockroaches to run out. And that's really what we've seen happen. Yes, and Dana and all these other people. And that's really what's happened, is that we have been keeping a very close track on their spending and their management of their organization. There's a lot of infighting. The government is looking into their misspending. It looks like they're funneling hundreds of millions of dollars to friends, family, contractors.
Wow.
They are, Wayne LaPierre apparently has got a $250,000 clothing allowance, which for a nonprofit seems pretty bizarre.
That's ridiculous.
It's insane.
$250,000 of donations, or for gun manufacturers, for clothing. Have you seen his clothes? I think
he
he's
gets
pocketing
them
the money.
at a Beverly Hills.
Oh, he does.
Italian clothing store. So I don't know. My jacket was $49.99, and I paid for it. But it's interesting because there's infighting. They're suing their public relations firm, Ackerman McQueen. Ackerman McQueen is suing them back.
Ollie North fighting too?
Ollie North was paid by Ackerman McQueen. It's like a whole very complicated divorce that seems to be happening, and it looks like the casualty is NRA TV.
It seems like a pyramid scheme on some level, but
yes,
there are people who gave money thinking the money was going to go to the cause that they believe in, and instead it's going to Wayne LaPierre's fine suits from Beverly Hills and stuff like that. And that has to upset anyone, whatever issue you're in. If you're giving money to an organization, you believe in this issue, and you find out the head of it or the vice president is spending it on extravagant lifestyle, you're like, come on, that's BS. Do you think there's a chance that NRA could actually go under, or you think there's a safety net that it can survive, just not be as visible?
I would never count the NRA down and out. I mean, people did in the 90s, and they came back to life. I think what happened and what's interesting is that the NRA thought they were making this investment in Donald Trump. They would pass their legislation, and then eventually a Democrat would be president. So they'd have the laws they wanted, and then they could have a boogeyman in the house again, in the White House again, to make people afraid every time there was a mass shooting that their guns would be taken away, right? Instead, they don't pass their legislation. Gun manufacturers are $100 million in the hole because there's no boogeyman in the White House, and they're publicly imploding. So it didn't really turn out the way they wanted to, but they'll figure out a way to come back.
How much does the NRA actually get funds from gun manufacturers?
The vast majority of their funding, and they have about a $350 million annual budget, and most of that comes from manufacturers.
Remarkable. All right, let's take a quick break. Come back with Shannon Watts. We're going to break through some of the talking points. It's a great part of her book on all the NRA talking points. We'll go through them quickly in a round robin style. We're all going to be smarter. Be right back after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
I think Trump clips that they play on the media should come with a health warning saying that if you watch this, you'll get dumber. Never has somebody said so much stupid in so little time as Donald Trump does.
Sirius XM Progress. You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back. Shannon Watts is giving me all pointers on branding, how to turn this show into the biggest progressive radio show in America. We're going to do it. Shannon Watts here. Moms Demand Action. Fight like a mother. Moms Demand Action. More people listen to this show. That's what we're doing. In 2020 can still come on. So Shannon, let's talk here for the 7 or 8 minutes. And you have a chapter near the end, which is really great. Dispelling the NRA talking points. Let's go through a few here. More guns mean less crime. What's your reaction to that one? That's in the book.
If more guns and fewer gun laws made us safer, we would be the safest country in the world. Instead, we have the highest rate of gun homicide of any of our peer nations, about 25 times more likely to be shot and killed in America than any peer nation. This is a failed experiment. I love how they're always saying just a few more guns and we'll just be so safe, as if 400 million just doesn't cut it.
What about this? You can't argue with this one. Only thing that'll stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Come on. You got to tell me that's not 100% right. I know the answer because I read her book.
Yeah.
So what is your reaction to this talking point we hear all the time? Whatever it is. Like they even use it for missiles now. The only person, a good person with a nuclear weapon is the only person who can stop a bad person with a nuclear weapon, which is horrific, but I've heard that.
Yeah.
So what do you say
Well, the
to people?
judgment of someone who is good is pretty arbitrary,
That's
right?
interesting, right?
So often people who are law-abiding, they don't have a criminal record, they haven't been adjudicated mentally ill, so they're considered able to legally own a gun, then commit an act of domestic gun violence. I mean, this idea of that there are these good guys versus bad guys, when there's such easy access to guns, that is what creates a problem. I mean, every country is home to people who are unstable or who are dangerous, or who have issues, but only America gives them easy access to arsenals and ammunition.
I like the debate over who's a good person. This metaphysical debate. Like, first of all, define a good person. Now, this is interesting. They have one, guns make women safer. How do guns make women safer? And it's one of the talking points of the NRA.
Well, we know that if you are in an abusive situation and you have a gun in your home, if you're a woman, you are 5 times more likely to be shot and killed with that gun. There was data actually that came out from the CDC that showed that having a gun in your home did not make you safer, which is not a huge surprise to anyone. But that is when the NRA decided that we needed to stop doing gun violence research. There's no data that says that guns make women safer.
It's just a talking point for them. What do you say to those on the right? And they say it all the time. Chicago's got the most strict gun laws. In reality, it doesn't really anymore, but it's up there. And I've had this discussion, maybe even with you or Lucy was on and others. What's your answer to that? People who have not heard the answer to, like, strict gun laws in Chicago, but people are getting killed there. Yeah,
it's like the Groundhog's Day of Twitter comments.
Right.
That, hey, Chicago has your dream laws. Why is it so dangerous? Chicago is a city. I'm a former Hoosier.
Right.
Chicago is minutes across the border from Indiana. Yes, Illinois has okay gun laws. They could be stronger. But all you have to do is ride your bicycle from Chicago into Indiana, buy guns at a gun show, and bring them right back into Chicago. And that's actually what happens, is that people load up trucks with guns, no questions asked, come back and sell them. And so when you look at the majority of crime guns in Chicago, they are from Indiana.
I saw a study that showed at the last time, about 60% of the guns found in Chicago involved in crimes were from other states, and the number one state, of course, was Indiana, because it was lax gun laws. They can drive them over here. How much is, there's talk often, and even President Obama talked about mental health being a component in some gun violence, although we know that people who have mental illness are more likely to be a victim of violence than the person who commits it. But sometimes we'll see a story, and maybe the media is quicker to dismiss it as as someone mentally ill than actually having a conversation about access to guns. But is there a component? And is there any laws that could be enacted that would reduce the risk of someone who's mentally ill not to actually have a gun?
Well, if you have been adjudicated mentally ill,
right,
you are a prohibited purchaser. But every nation is home to people with mental illness. As you said, people who are mentally ill are much more likely to be victims of crime than to be perpetrators. Right. This is often a straw man that we hear, so that we don't have to look at gun law. America gives them easy access to an arsenal and ammunition.
And you may have touched on it earlier, but is there any call for a national domestic violence type of restriction on having guns, or that's got to be state by state?
So there is a national law, there's a federal law that prohibits domestic abusers, convicted domestic abusers, from purchasing guns. The problem with our law is that doesn't include stalkers or dating partners. What's interesting is that provision was inserted into the latest VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and that actually just passed the House, and several Republicans voted for it, even though the NRA said, we are going to score the lawmakers who vote on this, and we're going to hold you accountable. They're still effective in some districts, but what's interesting is that before the last election in 2018, they had for years graded lawmakers A through F. They took all of those grades down because they realized that an A rating was actually a scarlet letter and not a badge of honor.
Right.
Thankfully, we saved all that data and just put it right back up.
No, I remember there were Democrats who said, I'm proud to get an F, and others saying I'm running against an A rated, and I would see it in literature. So in the 2020 election, Are we hearing enough from the Democratic candidates on this issue?
There has been a sea change in American politics. Just a few years ago, guns was considered the third rail of American politics. The NRA wanted it to be considered that. And now we have 23 candidates. Is it 23 now on the Democratic side?
Someone could have announced during the show. I'm not sure. So it could be up to 24 and 25.
They all support stronger gun laws. They're competing to see who can be the best on this issue. Even Bill Weld, who is the only person to primary the president, supports stronger gun laws. Really, the president at this point is the odd man out. That is a complete shift in American politics. And a CNN poll came out about 2 weeks ago, and it said for Democrats going into 2020, this is the third most important issue for them.
Wow. That's fake news, though. You know, CNN. I write weekly for CNN for years, so I've been writing.
Hashtag fake news, hashtag Dean.
Right, that's what I remember. Talking to an executive over there going, I've been writing for CNN so long, I was writing before you were fake news here. So let's take a break and come back for the last minute here with our friend Shannon Watts from Moms Demand Action after this break.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. The Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live with Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, talking about her work and her book, Fight Like a Mother, a new book. It's a really great book. It's part memoir, part helpful tips on how to keep going as activists, how to be effective. And there's a part in your book you talk about how to keep it going. Tell us, what advice from your own experience do you give to activists on this issue and others? Because we're so many are out here who listen are activists on different levels, on different issues. What do you say from your own experiences?
You know, I think the best advice I can give is to find something you're really passionate about. For me, it's gun violence prevention. I'm a full-time volunteer. I've woken up every single day for 6 years to work on this issue, believing that we will solve this in my lifetime. The gate at the White House. even an hour, and we call it naptivism as part of our organization,
Right.
but say your kids are taking a nap. That's a great time to call your lawmakers and make a request of them, or to use a hashtag on Twitter, or to send an email. And it's all about gauging the amount of time you have. But I really do think there's a moral imperative right now in this country on other things if I don't feel like my family is safe. But activism is incredibly rewarding, but it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're not going to solve pretty much any issue overnight.
One part of your activism should be listening to the Dean Obidala Show. Hashtag
Yes.
Dean. Hashtag Dean exclamation point, as Shannon told me. So are you last minute here, are you optimistic for 2020, not politically, but the candidates addressing?
I think that there will be pressure on Donald Trump if he ends up being the nominee to have an opinion on this.
And what's the website for Moms Demand Action?
momsdemandaction.org, and the hashtag is @momsdemand.
So, folks, check out the book. Check out Moms Demand Action. Get involved. Buy the book, Fight Like a Mother. It's a great book about Shannon's unique story, but also it's helpful tips for all of us on the roadmap to trying to be successful activists. Shannon, great meeting you in person.
You too.
I look forward to seeing you hopefully at your convention and in any event back on the show here in the future.
Thank you, hashtag Dean,
Hashtag, that's right, hashtag Dean. We take a break, come back. Julian Zelizer from CNN is going to be with us right here in studio right after this.